Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this very important Proposition 19 that was recently passed. I want to thank the Greater Downey Association of Realtors for always hosting these events that it gives us the information that we need to be more informed, to be better serve our community. And so with no exception, this new proposition has a lot of changes that I think are important for us to know. And my hope is that at the end of the session, you folks have a little bit better understanding of what this proposition does for us moving forward. So with that being said, let's begin. Next slide. Okay, so we have with us Louie, who is our government affairs director, and he's going to be hosting this with us. Hi, Louie.
Hello, Ruben. How are you? By the way, I had just realized I was on mute, and I was thanking you for your past year of leadership as president.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it was very interesting. It was great. I had a lot of fun in spite of everything that I have. I was very glad that I was able to participate. The board was amazing to me and this presidency, and so thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's been an interesting year with many things going on legislatively, both on the state and local level, even on the federal level. And of course, today we're focusing on Prop 19, which is, in my opinion, one of the biggest fundamental changes to the way property taxes are assessed and collected. So I figured this would be a good time for us to kind of do an interactive dialogue, as I presented some slides for us to go over here on the proposition. So.
Yes, and so this is also the proposition that a lot of people didn't really understand it completely. So hopefully after today, they'll be able to have a better feel for it.
That's the hope.
All right, so here's an overview of what the proposition is and what we're going to do here. We want for you folks to be asking questions. Jeanette's going to be available to answer any questions at any time. As we go through this, obviously, we're going to go through it. However, if there's something that you folks don't truly understand, please don't hesitate to ask the question through the chat so we can address it at that moment, because the question you may have, others may have it as well. Then that way everybody comes up knowing a little bit more after all this is said and done. Okay. All right, so I'm going to begin with the overview of what the Proposition 19 is. And as you can see there on your screen, it really came down to two major parts. First is what the tax portability and the inheritance properties. These are the two major parts of the proposition. Currently, as we know in California, the home values are reassessed after they were purchased. We know this. However, what the probability of Prop 19 allows anyone on the age of 55 plus, or someone that is severely disabled, or perhaps a wildfire victim. And as you know, recently we've been having these past few years major fires in the state of California. And so this prop was actually grounded with that item in there to move into their new home and keep their old tax assessment, which means that they can transfer their taxes from when they purchased their property to their next property if they are 55 plus, severely disabled, or if they are a wildfire victim in the state of California. Aside from that, the inheritance property, it also increases the property taxes for those inheriting property. So the minute that they inherit a property, that also is a big game changer. And so those are the two major changes that we got in this Prop 19.
Ruben, if I can add something before we go to the next slide, it's
Sure.
Absolutely, it's very important what you just mentioned, because it's absolutely correct. Prop 19, there's a lot of confusion to it, but the easiest way to try to remember it or understand it is just remember that it really just consists of two simple parts. That's tax portability and inheritance properties. Simply put, your tax base is now portable across the state. And also the way that you inherit properties or pass down properties has changed dramatically. we're going to get into a lot of detail, but those are the two main things. And that's why I put it as a first slide of an overview. So
yeah, and just so you know, if you could go back to the same, the last slide. When we're talking about portability, there was, certain counties were only the ones that were participating prior to this Prop 19, where you were able to move your property taxes previously from one county to the other county. And what this prop has done, now you can actually change it throughout the state. And that is huge because prior to that, people were limited to where they could move to if they wanted to retire, move to a different, and still have the same property tax base that they had when they purchased their home, if they were 55 plus of years. So this is a big deal. It's a really big deal. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, Louie.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to discuss on this slide was just the impacts of Prop 19. And there's four main points. Really, there's going to be a lot of revenue for local governments that are going to be raised, obviously, because as taxes on properties are increased, there's more collection on the state level of those taxes. It may free up the inventory, which is really good news for our industry. So if it frees up the inventory, that's opportunities for people such as realtors to actually sell and transact those properties. However, heirs will pay market value in taxes. This sometimes is not so good news for people, obviously, that are inheriting properties, but it is what it is in that particular case. And also when you advise your clients that are actually passing properties down or transferring them, there's the rules of the game have changed. And finally, there are tax breaks to older homeowners, however, as Ruben just said in the previous slide. Those are the major impacts of Prop 19.
Now, they also say, I've been hearing, Louie, and maybe you could correct this, if they want to avoid paying the heirs or avoid from paying their taxes, not necessarily avoid, but is it one of the questions that was asked to me, can they, prior to them, I guess you could say, inheriting the property, place themselves in title, and that way they can be joint tenants and they can avoid, because I know that that was one of the questions that was given to me and I wasn't able to answer. And I did tell them you might want to discuss that with a tax attorney. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. The simple answer is no. The more complicated answer is that there are a lot of gray areas in Prop 19, specifically the inheritance section of it, the transfer of the property. There's no clear answer to it, but I'm going to kind of tell you the answer like this. The legislators who drafted the bill thought of every single possible loophole, and they made it their intent to close those loopholes. So while it may appear that there's a loophole, don't count on it lasting.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, we have a
so
question.
next slide.
Yeah,
Yes.
Can we answer a question? Okay. What about if the old property taxes are higher than the new property?
So if the old property is lower and they're moving into a property that is, they're going to keep the lowest one. That's the easiest way to think about it.
So in the event that the second property they're purchasing happens to have a lower tax benefit, then that's the benefit that they're going to obtain.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Next. Okay, so pros and cons. Obviously, we look at this first in Prop 19. There are a lot of limits, the conditions under which the properties can be transferred without triggering property tax reassessment. And we were going to be going over some of them. Second, again, it expands the ability of people 55 plus, severely disabled, and victims of a natural disaster to preserve and transfer the assessed value of the primary residence to a replacement property. And this is, again, as we mentioned, throughout the state. It's not just by counties.
And this is, by the way, Ruben, this is that whole part about Prop 19 where, even if you recall in Sacramento when CAR met, the room was pretty much split as to whether or not to take a stance on Prop 19, and it took forever to finally come out with the position, and it was because of this particular slide. While it expands the tax portability of a lot of people, it also limits the conditions where you can actually transfer a property and benefit from it. So pros and cons,
Yes, absolutely. Okay, next slide.
So the next few slides, I wanted to pose some questions that were the most common ones that I've been getting that also have been posed on the website for CAR. So again, these next slides are just going to have questions on them and the answers are going to be listed. And of course, there might be additional questions that come up. So feel free to ask myself or Ruben as you see them. But what are the most significant changes made by Prop 19 regarding the tax portability? Just the tax portability part, not the inheritance property part. And there are three main significant changes. One, it allows a seller of a principal residence to transfer the tax base, as Ruben said, anywhere in the state. It allows those transfers of the value with certain adjustments to the tax basis if the replacement property is of greater value, kind of going back to that question we just got. So if the property is of greater value, I want people to understand you're not going to get a tax break in the sense that you're going to pay the same taxes. You're going to pay more taxes. There's just a formula that is going to be applied, allowing you to keep the original tax base. You're going to keep the original formula. I'll give you an example in a second in a future slides. Finally, it permits the transfers up to three times, but it's unlimited for those that are victims of a natural disaster. So those are the main differences there.
Now, when you say a natural disaster, can it also be aside from fire? Is there any natural, like let's say, for example, if there was an earthquake, for example?
Yep, it can. So natural disaster is defined beyond just the wildfires, although that was the original, because the wildfires have been such a big problem in the state. But you're right, it could be a flood, it could be an earthquake, pretty much anything that's defined as a natural disaster.
Okay. All right. Next slide. Can the replacement property can be of greater value? Well, yes. Prop 19 has, again, two provisions regarding the value of replacement. Obviously, it has to be when it comes to your primary residence, and that's very key. You only can transfer it when it's your primary residence. It cannot be a non-owner property where you don't reside in it. So this Prop 19 refers only for a primary residence. Number one, obviously it says equal or less value. So if the property is subject to an inflation index of 105%, and this is very important, and it's purchased within a year, and 110% if it's purchased within 2 years, the tax basis of the original principal residence may transfer to the replacement principal residence. So what it's saying here is that you got to do something within the next 2 years, because if you don't do something within the next 2 years and it goes beyond the 2 years, then you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're not going to be able to transfer over your replacement taxes. Right, Louie?
Yeah, that's correct. And one point, Ruben, I'll mention here, I've been giving this presentation so much that I kind of know where the questions are going to go. Typically, they go like this, because the reality is that in most cases, the property is going to be of greater value.
Yes.
Right? I mean, scenario one there is, it's possible, but the likelihood is much less than greater value. And there is a formula. So 2 points I'll make. One is that you're not going to pay the same taxes or less if it's of greater value. You're always going to pay more taxes. It's just that there's a formula that's going to be applied where you're going to take the original tax base, apply it to the new value of the new property, and then there's some math that goes into it, and you'll get the new taxes you pay. There's a formula, like I said, in a few slides we'll show you, but it's just important to understand you're not going to pay the same taxes or less if scenario 2 is your case, the property is greater value.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, Shannon wants to know, how long do they have post-sale? Is there a form they need to fill out? So you kind of just answered that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And remember, the formula is something that the county, Louie, right, where they're going to is the one that's going to dictate, right? Depending on the county that they go to. So every county is going to be different.
And there's going to be a calculator also on the state website. There also will be one on the tax assessor's website at some point. So there's going to be calculators all over the place, but for now we have to do it by hand, which I actually took time to do. You'll see in a few slides.
Okay.
It's complicated, but yeah, I did my best.
Well, the second thing that is very important in regards to the replacement principal residence is that the greater value, right? We talked about that briefly. The taxable value of this replacement primary resident is calculated by adding the difference between the full cash value of the original price range, price residency that it sold, and the full cash value of the replacement residency to the taxable value of the original primary resident. We're going to go over an actual scenario so that way you can actually see what that means in regards to numbers. I know right now it's kind of a little complicated to understand. Okay, next.
All right. So here's the slide where I always joke with people. Remember when we were sitting in high school math and like we never bothered to learn word problems? Well, here we are. Okay. So
Okay.
I mean, luckily I'm pretty decent at math, so I took some time to put this into
So
a formula.
you went back to your geometry classes, right?
Yeah, this is actually kind of a more of a calculus thing, but that's okay.
There you go.
So
Okay.
here's a scenario, okay? And the formula that I created down there, that's not how it's going to look on the state website. This is the actual, when you write it out, what it looks like. So a senior couple sold their home with an assessed value of $250,000 for $2 million. So the assessed value was $250,000. They sold it for $2 million and bought a new home for $3 million. The new home's assessed value would be 1.2 million, 1.25 million. Okay, and I'll give you the reason for that in a second, which is 250,000, which is the 250,000 assessed value plus the 1 million. Okay, read that and absorb it for a second because it's presented in a mathematical way below it. A senior couple sold their home with an assessed value of $250,000. They sold it for $2 million. Okay, so they received $2 million essentially. And they bought a new one for $3 million. So the greater value, this is scenario 2 in the previous slide from a while back. Okay, so they purchased up at $1 million. The new home's assessed value would be 1.25 million. It would not be 3 million. In other words, if just random people off the street without having sold the previous one were to buy it at 3 million, their assessed value for taxes would be 3 million. But in this case, this couple's assessed value for taxes would be 1.25. Now, the question is, why is that? Well, the reason is Prop 19. The next question is, how is that? And it's because of this formula. And essentially what you do is, let's look at the little formula at the bottom there with numbers in it. The new assessed value, which is the 1.25, equals the 250,000, which was the original assessed value, minus the difference of the purchase price of the new home and the selling price of the original, or of that same, or the original home, which is 1 million, right? So it comes out to 250,000 minus $1 million. If you know a little bit about math, if it's negative, it's a positive. So that's how the 1.25 comes out. I mean, it's simple, but it's not, right? Just plug in the numbers essentially, and that's how you get that value right there. The unknown, or the X, if you will, is going to be the 1.25. You're never going to know that. At the bottom formula, 1.25 is always going to be the X. It's going to be the unknown. That's the part you're going to have to figure out for clients. You're going to know, the 250, and then you're going to know the other factors in there, the 2 and the 3. You're going to know those. So plug those in, you'll get your value of the new taxes, bottom line.
Louie,
Yes.
what is considered a senior, 55 and over?
Yes, correct. That's 55 and over according to Prop 19.
Okay, and is this a formula currently used for Prop 65 and 90?
No, that's a good question. No, it is not. So Prop 19, they came up with this formula, and it's a completely new one. So the reason why that's such a good question is do not apply the formula if people are going through a transaction currently and they're using the old Proposition 60 or whatever, to sell the home and to calculate taxes. This is only applied to properties that are taking advantage of Prop 19 benefits. So, and then at the bottom here's the overall result. This is what I was trying to hammer home in the beginning. In this example, as you can see, they're not paying less taxes, and they're not paying the same taxes. They're paying less taxes than they otherwise would have been paying. So the new assessment.
And that's important, I think.
Yeah.
That's important because when we say you're going to pay less taxes, we're not saying that you're going to pay less taxes than what you're paying currently.
Correct.
You're just going to get paid less taxes of what you would have paid had it not been for Prop 19.
That's correct.
Yeah. Next slide.
So
Yes. So how many times can a qualified home take advantage of this tax base transfer? And how often can victims of natural disasters use this exception, which is a great question. So Prop 19 allows both those over 55 and severely disabled to use this exception up to 3 times. So it's actually in the proposition for us to not, I guess you could say, keep on doing it multiple times. You can do it up to 3 times, okay, in your lifetime. Prop 19 does not limit the number of time homeowners who had their principal residence substantially damaged due to qualify wildfire or any other natural causes. So if it's not because of natural disasters, then you can do it as multiple times as it happens. But if it's just because you're 55 and severely disabled, there is a limit of 3 times. Okay, so that's the difference between the 3. Okay, that only the natural causes of disaster that you can subsequently transfer your property tax base as many times that you happen to go through that experience, which we hope that it never happens, right?
right.
Yeah.
Ruben,
Yes.
when does Prop 19 go into effect?
So
Well,
I
go ahead, Louie.
So yeah, I can answer that. It's a tricky answer because there's 2 different dates. It's for the tax portability part, which Ruben is discussing and we've been talking about. That one takes effect in April. For the inheritance portion of Prop 19, that's February. But as you'll see in a few slides, they're expecting lawsuits essentially. So the perfect solid answer is kind of unknown, but at least according to the language of the bill, there's 2 different dates.
Louie.
Yeah.
Are there guidelines considered to determine a severely disabled person?
Great question. There is a slide in a few that will talk about that, but really the answer is severely disabled is a very broad definition. So it can mean, like, for example, my mom who has severe asthma, that would be considered severely disabled. Something that is long-term and permanent is technically how generally the answer would be.
Okay. So again, here you have, when does it go into effect? Again, there's 2 segments that we're talking about. We're talking about the inheritance aspect, and then we're also speaking about the portability of it. So the beginning April 1st, 2021, Proposition 19 applies to the transfer of one's tax basis anywhere in the state of California, regardless of value. So starting next year, in April 1st, that's where it's going to take an effect.
April Fool's Day.
Exactly.
And it's not April Fool's, that's for sure. So
yeah, that's real.
unless things happen when, again, there's some lawsuits that who knows that from now to then that can, make some changes. But as of now, that's the scheduled date. Go ahead, Louie.
Yeah, so here's a scenario. A person is over the age of 55 and they want to sell their home. Under Prop 19, do I need to wait until April 1st to purchase another home? How long can I wait? The simple answer is no, you do not have to wait. As long as either the sale of an existing home or the purchase of one occurs after April 1st, the transaction will be eligible for benefits of Prop 19. And also what CAR is advising is that if you have a client who wishes to obtain the benefits, the tax benefits specifically of Prop 19, that closes prior to April 1, whether it's buying or selling, they should be encouraged to seek a real estate attorney. And the reason why CAR is advising this is because in the language of the law, it's a little bit vague as to, it's clear as to when the law takes effect for this portion of Prop 19, but it's vague as to, well, what happens if there's already a property in transaction phase? They don't really specify. So there's going to be potentially some lawsuits for properties that are in transaction, but that's a whole different issue. But I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Okay. Next slide. So can a replacement property be purchased from the original primary residence being sold? of course, the simple answer is yes. This is how the current rule under Proposition 60 operates, and Proposition 19 uses nearly almost identical language. And so if you look at the two propositions, they look very, very, very similar. So yes, the answer is yes, you can.
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to transition into the phase of Prop 19 that talks about the transferring of properties or inheriting of properties, depending on what side you're on. If I pass my principal residence on to my children or grandchildren, will the property be reassessed? Okay. The answer is, as long as the property is used as a primary residence and the transferee claims the homeowner exemption on the taxes, on your taxes, the property tax basis will remain the same. Now, however, this is subject to some upward adjustments if the property value, I call it PV, at the time of the transfer is more than $1 million over the original tax basis. Okay, 2 points I'm going to make. One is that there's another formula we're going to go over. And second is that if the people who inherit the property are going to live in it long-term, primary residence, the taxes will remain the same. However, if that property is reassessed when it happens, when that transfer happens, and it will be reassessed, and if that reassessed value comes in at more than $1 million over when it originally was from point A when it was first purchased, you're going to pay more taxes. Again, Prop 19 is not a bill that allows for people to pay the same amount of taxes as they were assessed back in the 70s, 80s, or whenever the property was purchased. You're going to pay more taxes. It's just not as much as you otherwise would have. This is why they're calculating that Prop 19 is going to bring in so much revenue for the state, because it is. When you tap into that property tax basis that has never been tapped into for years, billions of dollars for the state.
Now, the question that I had in the past, Louie, from one of the people that I was talking to, they said, well, what if the property happens to be a income property that the primary residence was one of the units and the other two weren't? Let's say it was a 3-unit complex. The front house is a property where the primary residence they transferred over to the child. The child continues that residency to be the primary residence, and when they reassess it, because the property now may be worth more than $1 million because they're 3 units, then the assessment would still occur, but not to the extent of where it's supposed to be had it not been for Prop 19.
Yeah, exactly. So again, the people who drafted this legislation thought of every single scenario or loophole, whatever you want to call it. Yes. And they will not, they'll find out at some point. And that one particular unit that they're living in will be able to benefit from Prop 19, but the other two will not. And essentially they're going to divide it up. So there's no way around it, is kind of the easier way to answer the question. It's a new law.
All right, next slide.
Okay.
So here, go back to math.
All right. So I'll take, okay. So if the property is transferred to a child or grandchild and okay, it's used as a family home, what will the new tax basis be if at the time of the transfer, the property value is less than $1 million over the original tax base? All right, let me preface these next 2 slides with something though. There's 2 scenarios when a property is transferred according to Prop 19, okay? The 2 scenarios are, let's pretend for a second that we are the heirs. We're the children or the grandchildren, and we are inheriting a property. Scenario A is this slide where the value is less than $1 million over the original tax basis. So we're inheriting a property and it's reassessed, and that reassessment is less than $1 million over the original. If that's the scenario, this is the formula. The other scenario, which will be the next slide in a second, is if the reassessed value is over $1 million. It's a similar formula, but follow along here. All right, so if the property value A, there's only one property A, there's not 2 properties this time, only one property because it's being transferred. If property value A is less than $1 million over the original tax basis, then the taxes remain the same. Okay, for example, if the original tax base was 500,000, the tax base, not the value, okay? If the original tax base was 500,000 and the new property value, the tax value is 1.2, then the tax base will remain at 500,000. This is because 1.2 minus 500 is not more than $1 million over the original tax base. Now, 1.2 minus 500, that answer, that value is not more than $1 million over the original tax base. Okay, at the bottom, that's a proof of this. So how do I explain this? If the original property value A is less than the difference of the new property value, the new assessed value, and the original, if that is the case, it's drawn out in math, and that becomes true, then you know that your property taxes are going to stay the same. Again,
okay, so the key, I guess the key here on this scenario is that it does not exceed over $1 million.
that's correct.
So I guess you could say the simple math would be for us to subtract the assessed value from previously from the home, what it was assessed for what it is when now that it's being, I guess, reassessed. And if it lands under $1 million, then you will keep the original assessed value.
Bingo, there you go.
All right.
Ruben,
Yes.
where can you find a homeowner's original tax base?
Well, obviously, a lot of us, what we look at is you can either go to the tax assessor's website, you put their address, and it typically shares. There's a website through the tax assessor that you can do that. For some of us, again, that's probably the most concrete and reliable source. But some of us utilizes the property profiles that we get from title, who also get their information from the tax assessors. But if you really want to have concrete information, I would go to the website of the tax assessors, plug in the address of the property, and you'll be able to see that. If the homeowner happens to have a tax bill, then there as well, it will share and show how much the assessment is for that property. Okay. Louie, I'm gonna.
Okay, so
you're
I
good
knew
at
this
math.
was good. Yeah, I knew this was going to happen, man. So I kind of, I was preparing for this. So this slide essentially is the same as the previous one with one difference, and that is that the new assessed value is over $1 million from the original. So again, if the property is transferred to a child or grandchild and it's used as a family home, it must be. What will the new tax basis be if at the time the property value is more than $1 million over the original tax basis? Again, you apply the same formula. Just give you an example. If the original tax base again was 500 and the new value is 2.5 million, then the tax basis will be 1.5, and that is because 2.5 minus 1, which was the original value, is more than $1 million over the original tax basis. Again, formula at the bottom, plug in the values. It comes out to be true in this case. Therefore, that's how you know you're going to end up paying that particular amount of taxes, which will be more. Now, in both slides, I want to point something out. Both of the proofs came out to be true. That's only because I was proving the point. If the answer comes out to be false, then the reverse would be true. Bottom line, plug in the numbers. You want it to be true. Therefore, you can apply Prop 19. And there will be a calculator, okay, online somewhere that will make it a lot easier. I just wanted people to see how it looks when you actually do the math.
And to find out what the actual amount that they're going to be paying is what Louie is referring to as to depending on their assessed value. Here we're just making a scenario where it kind of wants to show you folks how it is, where if it was how to go about calculating if it's more or less in regards to the tax base. And that's the purpose of this. But now, to know exactly how much taxes they're going to pay, again, it's going to be, has to be calculated. And as Louie's been referring, there will be some calculators that can actually do that for you at some point.
And then
Okay.
Ruben, oh, go
Can we
ahead, I'm
answer
sorry.
some questions?
Sure.
Okay. Is the tax assessor the one that determines the new and reassessed base? Reassessed base?
Yep.
Is it the tax
Yes.
assessor? Yes.
So
Yeah.
one caveat to that. So there was a meeting that our tax assessor, Jeff Prang, had. And I mean, he said this.
He's
so
not the collector, he says, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's not the collector. And he also said that, you know, Prop 19 is really going to cause an extreme administrative burden for his office, because to that question, he
Yeah.
is the one that has to do these formulas.
Yeah.
And he's, well, I don't want to say freaking out, but he's not happy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a long question. This is based on original tax base, but each year they may have an increase of 1% or so. Are these based on the original tax base or the increased basis that's currently being taxed to the owner?
The original.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. And then Ruben, did you say that that calculation is available on calculators now?
No, it's not. As Louie has mentioned, right now everything's being done manually. However, it's the scramble that he just shared, that they're trying to put it all together so that they can have it available come February when this takes place. So if you go to their website, you will not find it as of today.
We should
But-
probably get the assessor on a webinar in after
Yeah.
February and after April.
Yeah, absolutely, because and obviously he would be able to give more accurate, you know, information. But as of now, the calculation and how go about it, it's not available. We just have to do it manually, unfortunately, until that's taken place.
There
Okay,
you
so now we're talking about, again, the second phase, and when does the family transfer rules take an effect? Well, the family transfer rules take an effect February 16th of 2021. Again, you know, there's going to be a lot of confusion with transactions that are currently in place that are going to occur in January, and when do they close, and if they happen to close, does it start from February 16, or is it okay to had it started before? And it's still, there's some things that are not as clear, but the transferees would have to claim the homeowners or disabled veterans exemption within a year after February 16th to transfer the obtained benefit of the family transfer tax exemption. So it's very important that you folks understand that it's going to happen as of that date, after that date, not prior.
Do you want to take another question or wait till later?
Sure.
Okay, what if a property is a non-owner occupied single family resident and is gifted to the child? Can you still gift without reassessment if it's under $1 million formula?
No, because again, this only takes an effect when the person that is transferring is their primary residence. And since in that scenario that was mentioned, it was a non-owner, it doesn't qualify.
Yep. And again, it's excellent
It's
point.
very important that you understand, even though, let's say, the non-owner property is going to become the primary residence of that child, it does not qualify because the person that's transferring has it as a non-owner, not necessarily as their primary residence. So it has to be the primary residence of the person that is transferring. That is a very big piece on this Prop 19. You cannot benefit from Prop 19 if it's a non-owner, even though the person is going to make it their primary residence. It won't qualify.
Yep. And
Go ahead, Jeanette.
Okay, I think you've already answered this question, but will it qualify prior to February 16th?
No, it has
Okay.
to be after February
Yeah.
16th.
Okay,
Correct.
is this why people are transferring properties now? Well, I guess
Yep.
that answer would be no.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And
they're trying to beat the deadline. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's a big, that's why a lot of people want to make sure it's understood, because after this proposition kicks in, it's going to be law.
I think the question could be answered, or it could be asked like in two ways, right? Like if you're the transferee or the heir, but
Yeah.
Right.
But the question basically is like, you know, can I inherit a property now and not have to call it my primary residence and still have tax advantages? Yeah, if you do it before February 16th.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's it for questions. Oh, except for, I was asked if this is recorded, and it will be on Mondays. Today Matters email on Monday, and also it's live right now on Facebook.
Yep. Take advantage before we put a dollar behind the thing.
you know, Ruben, I tell everybody, and this is hard for people to understand it many times, because most propositions and bills that go into effect don't fundamentally change everything. There's always some loopholes or things that are grandfathered. Not the case with Prop 19. This changes it literally into the future.
Yeah,
so
it really has. It's very airtight. It was
Yep.
very well written in the sense of what they wanted to accomplish, and so they took their time. So, all right, go ahead.
So intergenerational transfers, inheritance properties, previously exempted not only the transfer of the tax base of a primary residence, but also up to $1 million of all of the real property. Is this still the exemption? This question simply means, you know, the previous rules allowed for certain benefits. Do they still exist? The answer is no, exactly what Ruben was just talking about. This fundamentally changes the way properties can be transferred or inherited in the state of California forever.
Until they change it again.
Yes.
Which is unlikely.
Right. There's going to be so much revenue generated from this. I don't think the state will ever want to change it, you know, so.
That's right.
We're being asked if we can do the formula again for the inheritance portion. Did you want to do that after?
We could go back to it, sure, if that's okay, Ruben.
Go back?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, and remember there were two scenarios, but you could either one we can.
Here's the
talk
one
about.
under $1 million over.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess the easiest way of doing it is finding out what the original tax assessment was made for the primary residence when they purchased the property, and you subtract what the current assessment is for the property. So in this example that was created, you know, we were saying that it's 500,000, that it was the original, and the property was sold for 1.2. And so the assessment now is a difference. If you subtract the 500,000 from the 1.2, simple math tells us it's 750,000. Because it's under $1 million on this scenario, that means that they're going to remain with the original 500,000 because it does not exceed the $1 million threshold. So it's
everyone take a
important.
Picture.
You get an A+, Ruben, on that.
Yeah, see
Yeah,
it?
good job, Ruben.
And also,
So-
you know, another thing to think about is the lower the original PVA. So if you look at the formula, the lower that factor, original PVA, the higher the likelihood you're going to pay more taxes, because obviously the lower that value, the higher the difference is going to be.
That's right. So it's important that you guys, again, the replacement property plays a big role as to which side of the fence you're going to be in. Because if they buy something from 500,000 to 700,000, well, that's not much of a difference. So chances of them increasing their tax base is going to be very minimal. However, if they go from 500,000 to over, $1 million, you know, like almost 2 million, let's say a $2 million property, you subtract the $2 million property, which is our next slide. If we can go to that one.
Yeah, like an old home in Malibu that was bought way back when is reassessed now. I mean, that, you know.
Yeah, you bought a property. I mean, I had a client once in the 90018 area code. They purchased the property for 200,000 and it was sold for $1,500,000. So,
Ruben, if a mom adds a daughter on the title, it could be a way to avoid the reassessment in the future.
well, again, it all comes down to when do they do this transfer? When do they do it? Because the
Before or
transfer,
after?
remember, And if they don't intend to have their primary residence, then they need to do it as soon as possible, because once February 16 kicks in and they elect not to use their primary residence, Prop 19 will not be able to be incorporated.
Mhm.
It has to be prior to that they do this transfer.
Prior to the February 16th.
Correct. If they
Okay.
intend not to make it their primary residence. You know, my folks, they live in Southgate, and if they were to, you know, I don't see myself moving to Southgate. So if they were to transfer that property today, you know, then I'll be okay. But if I want to make it my primary residence after February 16th, that's not going to be the case.
Okay. Louie, someone is asking if you could re-explain the screen that's on right now.
Okay, yes. All right, so in this particular slide here, when the property was transferred, I'm going to assume that we're thinking in terms of us being the grandparents this time, or the parents. In this case, the property was transferred to the grandchildren, the children, whomever. And at the time of that transfer, the reassessed value is more than $1 million over the original. So let's say we, you know, purchased a property way back when at 500,000. Time went by, we had grandchildren, and now I want to pass that property down to them. Well, the property is now going to be assessed at 2.5 when I do that. In this case, there's a big difference between the original 500,000 value and the new reassessed value of 2.5. So in that scenario, when that happens, there's a formula that must be applied. And that formula is, of course, written out mathematically at the bottom, but really what it means is exactly what Ruben just said, is that the greater the difference from the original and the new reassessment, the greater that difference, the higher the likelihood it's going to be over $1 million. Therefore, you're going to pay more taxes. That's kind of like, you know, the explanation in terms of what ifs. I have a feeling, by the way, that in most cases, the scenario is going to be this slide for properties that are in higher price zip codes, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So when
so Louis, so in that scenario, I guess you could say, since it's now reassessed when the transfer happened, and we're assuming it happened after February 16th, and once that transfer was created, since it's now reassessed at 2.5, it was purchased at 500,000. We subtract the 500,000 from that 2.5, that leaves us at 2 million.
Yes.
Since 2 million is over the 1 million benchmark, now it's going to be a reassess based on the 2 million.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
so the property taxes will increase because of the fact that they're on the other side of the 1 million threshold. That's the, I guess you could say, the middle point. So now what it's going to be reassessed is still, again, being factored in as to how much.
Correct. And you hit on something really critical here. There's two kind of determinations, right? One determination you have to make is whether or not it's $1 million over the original tax base. So if the reassessment is over $1 million from the original tax base, that's determination one.
Right.
If the answer is yes or true, then the other determination you make is exactly what you just said. Well, how much taxes am I therefore then going to pay? Well, at that point, then, you know, you're going to do that other, you're going to apply the formula essentially, and you'll come out with an answer.
And again, we can't dictate as to how much yet, because they're creating the formulas to be able to decide as to what, and that is going to be the calculator that, you know, we're talking about, that they're going to put, that you put in your previous assessment, what the original was, with what it's going to be reassessed at the time of the transfer. And then if it is over $1 million, under their calculations, they'll dictate what the increase will be. And so I know it's hard to fathom or to, I guess, grasp, but it is going to increase. To what extent is still a question.
And you'll be able to determine from this formula the tax basis. In this case, we determined it was 1.5 because of the
Right.
formula. But what Ruben is, you're absolutely right. You won't exactly determine the exact amount you're going to pay on your tax bill because taxes change over time, you know, percentages. Right. So.
Okay, we have quite a few questions. So before I ask you guys the questions, everybody take a screenshot of this slide.
Yeah, this is a very important slide because in most cases, this is the scenario that's going to be more prevalent.
Exactly.
Okay, here are the questions. Does Prop 19 erase the safety of having a property in a trust to pass the property to their inheritor, their heirs?
Yes. Good question.
Yes.
So a trust doesn't matter anymore.
It does not. And this is why, that's the bullseye question. This is why when CAR met and we went through our business meetings, why the room was divided in half, why we couldn't take a position on it, because people were saying, well, wait a minute, I don't like that part of the bill. But the other half of the room was like, well, I like the tax portability part. There's no safe haven anymore with the trust, unfortunately.
Okay. I deal with more investor type properties. Please address investment property gifts and transfers.
This prop was designed for primary residence only.
Okay. If a portfolio,
I guess that's actually the simple answer.
Can I add something too? Good. Like, you're right. Like, it's the other way to ask the question, is it more difficult to now be an investor? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If a portfolio of properties are held under an LLC and the LLC is sold or members of the LLC are added or removed, will Prop 19 kick in?
Again, is the property a primary residence?
Right.
If it's a primary residence, then it'll apply. But if it's not a primary residence, then if you do any type of transferring, then you're going to be subject to whatever laws they currently exist. This is only for a primary residence situation. It's not a non-owner LLCs, incorporations, anything like that. It has to be a primary residence.
Is tax basis always the same as property value?
No.
Very different.
They're different.
Can parents transfer or add a child to title now to keep the same tax base?
Okay, so I can kind of address that. There's no clear answer in the language of the bill, but what I've been hearing attorneys, real estate attorneys are doing is that they're encouraging transfers now because the language does specifically say at the time of transfer. So if you take the language literally and you do the transfer now, well, at the time of transfer, Prop 19 doesn't apply because it's not February yet. So you're going to be protected by Prop 60. So you'd be safe if you beat the deadline.
Okay, a few of the next questions we've already answered, so it will be a quick answer for you. Does Prop 19 replace Prop 60 entirely or a portion?
It's kind of like apples and oranges, but they address two different things. So the word replace is not accurate, but does it indirectly fundamentally change it? Yes, I would say by about 90%, 95%.
When does Prop 19 go into effect? We've already answered that.
Yeah, Prop 19 starts again the inheritance aspect February 16th, and the portability is April 1st of next year.
Okay, and we've already answered this, but let's do it again. So how does it apply on investment properties?
Again, it applies, it doesn't apply because it's not intended for investment properties. It's only intended for primary residence.
Okay, and on the screen we're looking at now, someone's asking why is answer 1.5 million, not the 2 million difference?
Because again, we have to use the original 500,000 assessment and subtract it from the 2 million assessment, 2.5 assessment. That's when the transfer was made. When the transfer was made to the heir, it was reassessed at 2.5. So when you subtract the 2.5 assessment from the original assessment of 5 million, it gives you 2 million. And that is obviously above the 1 million threshold that they're looking for.
So is this where we left off?
Yes.
And I can dig deeper into those formulas. If someone wants to email after, I can give different scenarios and all that. It's complicated. I get
Okay,
it.
and again, this will be on Facebook and also on Today Matters email on Monday.
Absolutely. Okay. So we did do the slide. Again, it doesn't, in the integration, Louie went over it. So the next slide.
Oh, we already did that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. So now we come to the reason why it is so important us as real estate agents to contribute to our real estate action fund. Obviously, most of us, we feel that, there's, what's the reason of us continuously giving more and more funds? There are so many bills that are constantly challenging our way of practice. A few years back, we talked about there was a bill that was being introduced where we wouldn't be able to represent the buyer and the seller at the same time. And so dual agency was being challenged at its core. We were able to overcome it because of the lobbying that we did and the money that is contributed. As you look at this in our Realtor Action Fund, is a pretty much a duty, if you will, because it's voluntarily. Most of us as agents don't do it, but we can even do an introduction level. As you look at it, a minimum of $20, when in essence we should be giving $50 or even the $148 annually. Of course, this is an optional amount that we have to do individually, that it gets added to our annual dues. But our goal has always been to be that the majority of our I guess you could say membership contributes. Our minimum goal has always been to be around 20%. And it's important that we take it to heart, that we actually give some of this monies, because the monies go directly to fight bills that we feel that is going to hinder our way of practice, even now or in the future. And so we're very proud to say that over time, we've been able to bring down bills that have had a dramatic impact on our way of practice. We always say to ourselves, we always complain about the changes that are being made because we believe that we don't have a voice. Well, this is the time where you could actually say, you know what, I want to have my opinion. And you do that through our lobbying, through the people that are up in Sacramento, by contributing these funds, $20, $49, or $148. And those of us that really believe in this cause, is $449, you become a California Silver Bear. And this is an annual thing that we do every single year. So I encourage highly that if you feel these propositions that are coming in, and again, there's a lot more that are on the table right now that are challenging our way of practice, that we can contribute so we can have opposition on those bills if we feel that it's going to hinder our way of conducting business and obviously our future. So I encourage you highly that you, now that our dues are coming through, that you add an additional $20, that you add another $49, because it's going to go a long way. I think it was a year or 2 years ago, we defeated Proposition 10. And because we defeated it when it came to rent control, the legislation picked it up and they made it law anyways. So I know that it's important, and I do believe that it's something that sometimes we don't want to do, but I just do definitely encourage you folks to contribute as much as you can. And again, the introduction level is $20, which is very affordable. And this is to our Realtor Action Fund.
Well said. There are two people that did not type their question in the Q&A. Instead, they have raised their hand. Are you guys okay to take a live question?
Absolutely.
Okay, here goes Marco Cordova.
How you doing, Marco?
Oh, he left. Okay.
Okay.
Alicia Fambona, do you want to?
Hi, Alicia.
Alicia.
You can unmute yourself and hear it.
Okay, maybe not. Okay, then that's it.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Louie. Thank you, Jeanette, for conducting this. I know that it's it's a lot of information, and I do appreciate all of you that were on. I hope that now that you were able to hear us, you got a little bit more information on this. So thank you again for having this, and we look forward in being more of help to you folks down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ruben, for your leadership in 2020. We look forward to 2021. Thank you.
Yes. Merry Christmas to everyone, and have a safe one. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Okay, great, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Louie. Oh, you're gone. Okay.